If we look at the Electoral College, there are currently three main flaws or arguments people make against it. The first one being that the winner of the popular vote may not always win the election. And this happened most recently in the election of 2000 when Al Gore lost the presidency to George W. Bush despite winning the popular vote. And if we look at it, that really the election came down to Florida, where 537 votes decided the difference of George W. Bush winning 25 electoral votes and Al Gore not winning any. But why does this happen? First and foremost, as we talked about a little bit last week, when presidential electors and their strategists are looking at an electoral map like this here, they're looking at a map very similar here, and they can look at it and they can say, okay, these red states, regardless of the candidate, is going to probably vote Republican. These blue states, more than likely, are going to vote Democratic. And so what they do is they focus in on these green states, or these toss-up states. We've also called them swing states or purple states. And basically, all a candidate has to do is win the right amount of states in order to win 270 electoral votes. It doesn't really matter about the overall popular vote. Instead, it's just what do they have to do in order to win the 270 electoral votes. In addition, another challenge to this is that actually the electoral votes are not actually allocated evenly. Unlike in the House of Representatives, where our representation, each state receives the same proportion of representatives of their population, actually electoral votes are not actually evenly distributed, and I'll give you the example. You look at the state of California and the state of Wyoming. Now, looking at it right away, you should say, oh, California has way more electoral votes, way more impact than the state of Wyoming with only 3 electoral votes. But in reality, because of the way electoral votes are distributed, remember they take the number of people in the House of Representatives plus the number of senators, it actually skews this number. In the state of California, 1 electoral vote equals about 615,000 people. So if we look at, whereas in Wyoming, 1 electoral vote equals about 493,000 people. So the electoral votes are not always evenly distributed. So if we look at these two instances, this is why sometimes people will attack the Electoral College, because not always the winner of the popular vote will win the presidency. Second, you could have an instance of a faithless elector, where a member of the Electoral College may not follow the popular vote because there's nothing in the Constitution, there's no enforceable state law that stipulates that the presidential electors have to follow the popular vote. Instead, it's just a tradition. Or the third major flaw in the Electoral College is if no candidate wins a majority of the electoral votes, in this case 270 electoral votes, then the popular vote no longer matters, and instead the election would be decided by the House of Representatives. So these are 3 main reasons, or 3 main flaws in the Electoral College. The winner of the popular vote may not always win the election. Second, you could have a faithless elector. Or third, you could have the House of Representatives deciding the election. Alright, next I want to look at 3 proposed reforms to change the Electoral College. An important point to consider here is that any formal change in the Electoral College would require a constitutional amendment. The first proposed reform is called the District Plan. This is actually in use already in states like Maine and Nebraska. And what it states is it basically breaks up a state into the congressional districts and states that whichever presidential candidate wins a congressional district, they will win 1 electoral vote, and then the overall winner of the popular vote in that state will win the additional 2 electoral votes. So if you look at the 2012 election, if we look at the state of Virginia, Obama won the state of Virginia with 13 electoral votes. Romney did not win any. But if Virginia went to this proposed district plan, Obama would have only won 4 electoral votes, where Romney would have won 9. Second, you could look at a proportional plan, where you look at the popular vote in a particular state and the candidate wins the same percentage of electoral votes as the state's popular vote. This would be similar to the way in which our primary system works, And I have a number of examples here of how it would have impacted various elections if we use this system. Third, would require getting rid of the Electoral College entirely, and instead just make it a popular vote in the country, where it is strictly the person's choice, and the person who wins the most popular votes in the election wins the presidential election. Despite the proposals for the three reforms, unless there's some sort of catastrophic issue or problem, I think the Electoral College is here to stay, and there's a couple of reasons for that. First and foremost, it's a known process. With any of those other three reforms, there are probably things that we do not realize or things that we don't necessarily account for. If we look at the Electoral College as it works today, only 6 times in our nation's history has the Electoral College not quote-unquote worked. Only twice has the House of Representatives decided the presidency. The last time was in the 1800s. And only 4 times has the loser of the popular vote actually won the election. So it's a pretty much a known process. And then second, it gives us quick results. More often than not, on election night, by the time we go to bed, our newscasters, whether it's on Fox News, ABC, or CBS, or MSNBC, can predict with pretty good certainty who is going to win the presidential election. Thank you very much for viewing.